Hello, welcome to Nature Source Care. This is Dr. Funda Goldman, and today I was hoping to talk to you about choosing the first beverage of your day and all the considerations you might put into that. And part of this talk will include herbal, yoga, and Ayurvedic considerations. So, if you think about it, the reason why what you drink first thing in the morning is so important is that you are actually mostly water. And the number they usually give for the percent of body weight that is water is 75%. So, most of you is water. So, replenishing that is really important. Another reason why thinking about what you drink first thing in the morning is so important is that drinking is actually more important than eating. And we can see this in a numerous variety of ways. One is that we last only a few days without water, but we can actually go a few weeks without food. So clearly the liquid portion of what we take in is very important. The other thing to think about is that when somebody's ill, like they have a cold or flu, otherwise have some condition, they're in a weak state or they're young, like babies and children, small children. The things that these folks tend to eat are liquid foods, basically teas and soups and cereals. So there's a reason for this is that, one, you want to replenish the fluid that these people are losing, but you want to make the food that they're taking in a form that's really easily absorbable and accessible to their body. The other reason why drinking is so important is that if you learn to drink well, you can actually learn to eat well also. It's really the starting point for a lot of things. The first thing you drink in the morning, one of the things you're really doing here is you're rehydrating your body. You've gone a good 6 to 10 hours while you were sleeping when you weren't drinking anything. So when you wake up, you are dehydrated to some degree. So you want to replenish those fluids so that your body works optimally. The other thing is that while you're sleeping is that your body is going through a pretty intensive repair process. And so there are metabolites that are left over from that process. And you really want to clean out the body, flush out the body of those metabolites so you can pretty much start with a clean slate internally. The other thing is that by drinking fluid first thing in the morning, it really helps prepare your digestive system for the rest of the day. You really want to flush out the bladder, the colon, and basically you're preparing your system, your body to accept and properly break down more food for the next day. So what you drink in the morning is really important for your physical health, not just the fluid, but things you can put in the water. We'll talk about that. But the way you drink the water, not just what you drink, but how you drink the water, how you go about setting that daily ritual potentially, can really set the tone for your day and really help uplift you mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. So we'll go into that as well. I talked about dehydration a little bit, and let's just go through dehydration. Most people kind of see it as a pretty severe thing, and it can get severe. What most people probably wake up in the morning is more subtle, but let's go through the symptoms and also the causes so you're aware of why fluids, again, are so important for the body. So early symptoms of dehydration include thirst and dark urine because the urine is more concentrated. It's going to have a darker color to it. Also, you're going to have a decreased urine production, so the amount of urine that you produce is going to be smaller. So it's going to be, again, more concentrated. The other thing that people don't talk about too much is that you can also get constipated by not drinking enough and being dehydrated. Because, again, to form a bowel movement, you need enough water to pass that out of your colon. Otherwise, the colon just gets dry and it's hard for things to move through the digestive system. And then also dry skin. You might notice that if you go out in the evening and drink a bit of wine, alcohol, coffee, or eat something really salty, these sorts of things, they're all dehydrating. They'll show up on your skin pretty quickly the next day. So the next level, though, of dehydration, which some people may be experiencing, is that you might actually start to get a dry mouth. So, your mouth might feel a little bit clammy. Also, your voice might change a little bit. Your voice might get stuck or crack or sound a little bit dry. Especially when you're doing something like this, talking a lot. But you can also start to get things like headaches and feel dizzy. Your mood might start to shift. You might get a little cranky. You can start to feel tired. So you can see that as the dehydration sets in at a deeper level, you start to get deeper symptoms of what the dehydration is affecting. So what you see here is you get deeper into the tissues, including the nervous system, right? Headache, dizziness, mood, fatigue. You're getting into basically the nervous system. You can also get muscle weakness. So again, you're starting to get deeper into the tissues here. Some people do get into extreme levels of dehydration, and this is typically where you lose 10 to 15% of your water weight, essentially. And when you get to this point, it is pretty extreme, and you may not sweat anymore because you just don't have the extra fluid to expend. Your eyes might look sunken. Your blood pressure might actually lower, if not bottom out, so it can be potentially dangerous. Somebody might pass out from this. Your heart rate might increase because you just don't have enough fluid in your blood. Your blood is getting concentrated as well, and so it's just not flowing through your body as well. And your heart's trying to make up for that by trying to pump harder and faster, but you just don't have enough volume to push through your blood vessels, essentially. You might start to get a fever because you're not sweating. You're not able to release heat from the body as much, and so your core temperature might start rising. And this can lead to other symptoms like delirium. This is where the heat is basically affecting your brain, and you might start to act a little strange, talk a little strange. Other people will probably notice. You may not be able to notice anymore if it goes too far. And at some point you might actually go completely unconscious when the dehydration gets too severe. So again, as the dehydration gets more extreme, you start to see deeper and deeper and more extreme symptoms result. And some of the causes of dehydration, the first one is drinking insufficient levels of just plain water. And this, I'm not talking about juice or coffee, tea, or anything that might be in the water, because these things may actually be more dehydrating than hydrating. Things like coffee and tea, they have a certain level of caffeine. Caffeine is diuretic, so it will actually increase the level of fluid output through the urine. Things like juice and milk, they have sugar in them, natural sugars like natural fruit sugar in juice and natural milk sugar in milk, but the amount of sugar and salt in the body actually affects the amount of water, so that can be a problem. Also, alcohol is also a diuretic, so that will also get rid of extra water. You might find that if you go and have a few glasses of wine or a beer or something, is that you'll end up in the bathroom pretty frequently because you're just urinating more because of the alcohol content. Another reason why somebody might get dehydrated is because they have an excess loss of fluid. So when the weather is hot and dry, summertime, you will lose more water through the skin. And this might result in sweating. You might actually see it yourself perspire. You might see the extra water in your clothes or dripping on your forehead or something like that. But it doesn't always have to be that obvious visually. You can be in a very dry place and the vapor from your body will just come off your skin in not so obvious way. So you can even be in a cold place that's very dry and still have an excess loss of fluid. When I was traveling through Iceland, which is very cold and dry, I immediately, within the first morning I woke up there, I could see a huge difference already in the dryness of my skin, and I really had to work on pumping fluids, water into my body to stay hydrated, because I was even urinating less. So something to consider there. The weather and geography can affect your loss or the rate of loss of fluid. Also, when you get congested, so if you have a lot of nasal congestion or lung congestion, basically the congestion is made from water in your body. So the water that's in your tissues and in your cells helping you function, actually some of it's getting pulled out to flush out like the nostrils, the nasal cavity, and also the lungs. That's essentially what congestion is. It's trying to cool things down, soothe things down, but it can get too extreme, especially if you're dehydrated. if you're dehydrated, you might end up getting this really kind of sticky, uncomfortable congestion that doesn't seem to move anywhere because you're also dehydrated. And you're losing even more fluid because your body's trying to create this congestion to flush out these spaces. Activities like vomiting and diarrhea, big loss of water there, and also loss of electrolytes. So if you, for example, lose too much salt, you can actually lose water as well. So one example of this, I was actually on the triage team for the New York Marathon, and for some people it was somewhat surprising. Towards the end of the marathon, the last few SAG stations, the places where people pick up a little bit of water or banana or something like that to kind of keep going through the race, the last few stops they actually had packets of salt. And the reason why they do this is because when people are involved in an intense activity like that for a long period of time and they're sweating profusely, through the sweat they're actually losing salt. And if they lose enough salt through the sweat, they won't be able to maintain the level of liquid in their body. So for a few people at the end there, they actually needed to take in a little bit of salt so that they could hang on to the water. It's a situation called hyponatremia, or too little salt in the body. So again, that tends to be in extreme activity situations, especially like and then again, if you're doing, really intense physical activity like that, when it's hot and dry outside, you're kind of doubling up on the effect of your dehydration. And I mentioned already, if you do something, not just sort of, it is physical, but not as sort of obviously like you're not like lifting weights or cleaning your yard or something like that, but just talking, speaking, singing, just by doing moving your vocal cords and moving air through your respiratory system, you actually lose a lot of water that way. So people who talk and speak and sing a lot, they should really watch their fluid levels also, and they can hear it pretty quickly in their vocal quality if they do get dry. Caffeine, I already mentioned a little bit when we talked about coffee and tea. Even decaffeinated coffee and tea, there's a lot less caffeine, but there is still a little bit, a few milligrams. So still something potentially to watch out for if you drink a lot of it. Maybe even if it's decaf, if you drink a lot of decaf, that could be potentially a problem, especially if you're not drinking extra water on top of something like that has sugar or salt or caffeine or alcohol. And also medications. Medications can be very dehydrating as well. So you might be on some sort of medication that helps to, whether you're looking for it or not, it may actually dehydrate the body. And then the third cause for dehydration potentially is sequestration of fluids within the body. So when you have something like a burn, you might notice that, you get burned, excuse me, you might get burned and then there's like some swelling there. And sometimes you might even get like a little bubble or blister or something like that. So you will actually be, that little bubble is filled with fluid and that little swelling is filled with fluid. And, even something like a burn, or excuse me, not a burn, but a bruise, when it's all swollen like that, basically the capillaries are opening up a little bit so that the anti-inflammatory markers can go in there and kind of, clean out the wound and repair the tissue and stuff like that. But during that process, when it's swollen and kind of wet looking, fluid is sort of on the exterior of your skin, in that bubble or in that swelling, in that pocket, and so it's not available to your tissues and cells to function properly. So if you have a lot of burns, a pretty big area, or a lot of swelling, this can be a problem. Or if you've just had surgery, for example, sometimes when they do surgery, they will, just by the nature of the activity, they will end up potentially cutting some lymphatic vessels, and when the lymphatic vessels are disrupted through surgery, let's say you had a lumpectomy from breast cancer, or you had something removed on your hand, like a cyst removed from your hand, or you had a knee replacement, that sort of thing. for a while, especially while that tissue is repairing itself, it's going to be swollen, and the lymphatic vessels may also be cut permanently. So you may always have a little bit of a problem draining the exterior, the peripheral tissue, to let that liquid come back to the center of the body. So that's also something to consider. Menstruation, so periodically, or excuse me, temporarily, when women are going through their period, the circulation around their uterus changes and the blood vessels start to open up, fluid starts to move into the space, the abdominal space, so temporarily for a few days, up to a week or so, a lot of the fluid in the body will move into the center of the being. And so there's less fluid available for the other tissues, peripheral tissues, to function properly. Breastfeeding is another activity. You're losing fluid through the breast to feed your child, so you really want to make sure that you're getting proper and sufficient levels of fluids then. And I mentioned briefly is that high sodium intake. So if you eat a lot of salty food, the nature of salt, or excuse me, the nature of water is to follow salt. So if you take a lot of salt in, water will follow, and you'll find that your tissues in general are just kind of swollen, slightly swollen all the time. You might see it in your face a little bit. Usually you can kind of even poke your skin a little bit and you'll just see that you're just a little bit swollen. Your rings might fit a little bit differently. Your waistband might fit a little differently just from eating a lot of salty food. So that will also affect levels of dehydration. So plain water, good idea. And what I'm talking about here is about 8 to 12 ounces of water, so a cup and a half for most people. And there is, there is a caveat to all this. Some people, they want to drink water, and they're really good about it, and they drink water all day. Not everybody should do this. If, for example, you're on a liquid restricted plan, let's say you have some kidney issues, and your kidneys are compromised, they may not be able to filter all the liquid that you take in, so you really have to watch that. So the things that I'm talking about today, especially the level of fluid intake, may not be appropriate for those people. The other thing is that I mentioned, at least through the example of the New York Marathon, is that you can drink too much water. If you never eat any salt in anything, if you get to that level of extremity, you can also develop hyponatremia and get into problems there. So you just want to make sure everything's in balance. You want to make sure you get enough, but again, you can overdo anything. So sometimes the cure can actually become the poison in particular contests. Okay, so just keep that in mind as we go through. But again, for most people, they actually need quite a bit more water than they're actually drinking. So some people, the first thing they talk about when I mention drinking more water is they're concerned about the quality of the water that they have available to them. One thing that people like that do, if you have concerns about the quality of your water, is that you might go to a hardware store or a natural food store. They have home kits that you can, home kits that you can take and test your water and see the quality of it, see what's in it. So they'll test things like the pH of it, so the level of acidity. They'll see if there's any bacteria in it. They may test some heavy metals, and they may test major pollutants, just to make sure that, by and large, your water is drinkable or and not dangerous to you. So that's usually a pretty inexpensive way to go about just seeing what the quality of your water is. Then if you choose to, you might start looking into different filtration methods. The first, probably most common way that people filter their water is a pitcher filtration method, where you have a big pitcher and there's like a filter on the top, and you pour tap water, for example, in the top, and it goes to the filter. This is nice to some degree. It eliminates, these sorts of filters tend to eliminate large particulate matter, so like if there was some sand or something like that, or if your water coming from the tap is highly chlorinated, it will take out some of that chlorine, so it might make it smell a little bit better. But it doesn't do really small stuff. It won't filter out everything, just really large things like that. Some people look into getting tap attachments, so more invested sort of filter that you can actually attach to your tap at home. And depending on the size of the filter in the attachment, it will filter out almost everything. So it should be super clean water, but some people don't want to get into the expense of it. So that's something to consider. Some people really like to drink mineral water. This may be a good idea for some people because it's one way to get more minerals into the body. For example, if you're drinking mineral water that's high in calcium and you tend to have osteoporosis or thinning bones, that might be a nice way to get a little extra calcium into your body. The thing though is that each brand of mineral water will be different in terms of which minerals are high in that water because it's coming straight from the ground. So different areas of the world will have different levels of minerals. So you need to look at which minerals are high in that mineral water and also look at the pH because that will vary brand to brand. But that might work for some people drinking mineral water. Sparkling water. So some people like to drink sparkling water. They like the bubbles, they like the fizz, they like the way it feels when it goes down the throat and into the stomach. It can settle the stomach a little bit on occasion if people are having a little problem there. The problem with sparkling water, though, if you drink too much of it, is it can cause indigestion. The bubbles in the water will, you're drinking in gas and air, and so it can cause gas and bloating in your digestive system if you drink too much or if this is all you drink. So you have to be careful with the amount of sparkling water that you drink. On occasion, potentially, but every day, all day, probably not a good idea. The other thing about sparkling water is that it's more acidic, a pH of 5, than plain water, which tends to be a pH of 7.4. So because the water is more acidic, it can irritate tissues and affect tooth and bone health over time, again, if done in excess. So something to consider there. Some people really like to get into alkaline water. They may do this because they're thinking this is a good way to decrease the pH, decrease the acidity, overall acidity of the body. Alkaline water, though, is very alkaline. It tends to be a pH 8 or 9. And the stomach, though, the pH of the stomach, the natural pH of the stomach is about a 2. It's very acidic. And the reason why the stomach is very acidic is because you need that acid to break down proteins. So if you eat a piece of chicken or steak or any other protein, the way that those proteins get broken down is through acid. So if your stomach is naturally at a pH of 2 and you're drinking this alkaline water of about pH of 9, you're kind of dousing out that fire that you need to break down protein. So an immediate reaction might be stomach upset or cramping, pain in the stomach, but you're also potentially decreasing your ability to properly digest protein. So that can be a long-term problem, if your body's not able to break that down, just all the way through the digestive system, and your body's not going to be able to get the nutrition, the complete nutrition out of the foods that you're taking in. So that can be a problem. Distilled water, once in a while I get questions about this. It is dangerous to drink. Because it's too pure. There's no salt in it, naturally occurring salt. And so kind of gets into this idea, almost related to the New York Marathon idea, is that if you drink all this very pure water and there's no salt, it can actually draw minerals out of your body because it's too pure. Because your body's always looking for balance. So if you're drinking 100% pure water and the water in your body is not pure, the minerals will start to balance themselves out. It just follows the water, but that may not be a good thing for your tissues and your cells. It may, again, you might lose too much salt and electrolytes and minerals by drinking distilled water. So I would stay away from that. The other thing to think about when you're thinking about what you want to drink in the morning is the temperature of it. Typically, the best level of temperature is a room temperature or slightly warm. For the most part, that's really the best. You can drink, fairly warm or even hot liquids, as long as you don't burn your lips. Especially like in colder months, it's a nice way to stay warm. But I wouldn't go too far in terms of the coldness. I wouldn't get too much in the habit of drinking cold and ice drinks. The reason why this is important is because when you throw ice and cold drinks in your stomach, and again, your body's, about 90.6 degrees Fahrenheit, what is going to happen is you throw ice in your stomach and it's going to constrict the blood vessels in your digestive tract. And it's going to decrease your ability to process food in an optimal way. So you might have experienced like maybe you outside, hot day, or go for a run, or you're in the yard or something, and you come inside and you're like, oh, I really want some cold water to drink to cool off. And you drink this cold water, and then all of a sudden your belly just sort of bloats up, and you're like, all I drank was water. What happened? That's because of the coldness and because the blood vessels are constricting. So again, especially if you have any sort of digestive issues, I would stick to room temperature or warm, and maybe just slightly cool in the warmer weather or if you have a fever. So let's talk about what you can put in the water. Some people like to put stuff in their water because they don't like the taste of plain water. But you can also think about what you put in the water because you might as well sort of get the most out of your experience. So let's talk about common things that people put in their water and the good that they do, and maybe some of the caveats to them, so that you can be more mindful about the choices that you make for what you drink in the morning. So one of the most common things people drink is lemon. They'll put lemon juice in their water. And lemon has a lot of positive effects in the body. Nutrition, very high in vitamin C. It's got bioflavonoids. There's some calcium, potassium. So people typically like to, boost their vitamin C that way, help their immune system that way, first thing in the morning. They can help with the respiratory system, coughs. Coughs, for example, it's a decongestant. So if you're a little congested, it can help with that. It's a cardiovascular heart tonic, so that's pretty nice there. If you have a little bit of, cardiovascular issues, it's kind of nice to keep things flowing in that direction. The gastrointestinal system, it helps with indigestion. It's a mild laxative. It enhances bile flow. So it'll kind of get the system moving, kind of perk up the liver a little bit, get the bile flowing. That bile drips into the colon, which irritates it a little bit, and then that's why it's got kind of a laxative property that way, because the bile is irritating the colon. It can help with nausea. So if your stomach is a little bit icky, if you're traveling, if you've got morning sickness, it can help with that. It stimulates appetite, so something to consider, because again, that sort of food is stimulating the liver. It's kind of telling the digestive system, hey, get ready, food is coming. So the whole system kind of wakes up, but that means that it's going to increase your appetite potentially. So if that's not something you want, this may not be the best choice for you. Also, gallstones, it can be helpful, partly because you're getting that bile flow from the liver, so it just sort of is a little bit of a liver flush. But because it's also acidic, it can help to slowly dissolve stones over time, potentially. And bleeding gums, this gets back to the old notion of scurvy, and sailors bringing limes and lemons with them on the boat, because without that vitamin C, tissues start to break down, because you need vitamin C to support collagen winding and tissue buildup. So without enough vitamin C, the tissues will get potentially kind of weepy. In the first place, you tend to see that as a place like the gums. They'll just be kind of red, irritated, and might bleed too often, especially when you brush your teeth. Kidney stones are also potentially help with lemon because of the acidity. It's a little bit of a kidney flush as well. It helps with gout as a musculoskeletal condition, because again, you're flushing out the body and you're flushing out the kidneys. Uric acid is produced through the kidneys. It also helps the immune system through the vitamin C and bioflavonoids, so it does have a bit of an antibacterial effect. Morning sickness I already talked about, because it subs the stomach a little bit. So the general properties of lemon are that it's detoxifying, it tones tissues, it can be nourishing, it can decrease fever, it can deliver other herbs to the liver because it kind of has an affinity for that organ, and it can help digest heavy foods like avocado and other kind of fatty foods. The thing though about liver, as great as it is and as many positive qualities as it has, is that it is very acidic. And the nature of any acid is to heat and corrode. So it can exacerbate any inflammatory condition. So if you have any kind of extreme inflammation in the body, lemon, especially daily, is probably not a good idea for you. It can do things like make gastric reflux worse. Um, it won't necessarily cause it unless you're drinking tons of lemon juice every day, but it can definitely make it worse because of the acid. And it can even dissolve teeth because of the acid. So if you drink a lot of lemon water, your dentist probably won't be happy with you. So you might consider lemon as for occasional use or situational use. Like if you have cold or flu, you might drink, some hot lemon tea then. But for most people, daily ingestion is not the best idea. So lime is in the citrus family. Some people like to, think about lime and lemon are pretty much interchangeable. But does it actually have the same medicinal effects as lemon? Let's talk about that a little bit. So in the Western system, when we're talking about things like vitamin C and bioflavonoids and that sort of thing, they're pretty much interchangeable. But if we consider other paradigms of medicine, such as Ayurveda, which is traditional Indian medicine, they look at foods in different ways. So they look at the energetic properties of food. And in that system, lemon and lime are energetically different. So they have different properties. Lemon is heating, and you can just imagine if you turn the heat on, things are going to start to melt, including things like in your body, congestion. It's also going to get the circulation going, so it's going to increase circulation. So lemon tends to be better when there's colder weather or when you have colder symptoms in the body. Lime, on the other hand, is cooling. So it's actually more helpful with inflammatory conditions than lemon, and it tends to be better in warmer months, just because of this cooling energetic property of it. So actually, lime is not a good idea if you have colds, flu, or congestion where the body is cold. So energetically, very different Ayurvedically in the Western system, almost identical. So something to consider there if you're thinking about, oh, well, lime might be a better thing to take in. It depends. Consider your context and what you're experiencing and your overall system, as always. So one thing you might replace lime and or lemon with is aloe vera. Most people, when I talk about aloe vera, most people are like, oh, you put that on your skin for sunburn. So that's what people know aloe vera for. But there is food grade aloe vera available that you can take in and ingest. And what's nice about aloe vera is that it has a lot of the similar sort of detoxifying properties as lemon, but it's not acidic. It's actually balancing and cooling. So it's good for almost every time of year, and it's good for almost every kind of condition. There are very few. It's hard to go wrong with aloe vera. So that's kind of nice. So the gastrointestinal benefits, it soothes and normalizes the digestive tract, whereas lemon and lime can exacerbate things like acid reflux. Aloe vera is actually taken for acid reflux to cool and soothe the irritated, inflamed tissues. Skin, you can put aloe vera on the skin, but if you get food grade aloe vera, you can take it in and actually help your burns and rashes and irritated skin internally, which is nice. It does help the immune system. It has anti-inflammatory properties and actually improves joint health because it's cleansing and cooling and soothing to those hot, inflamed, irritated joints. It helps women a lot improve their urine health. Almost any menstrual issue, from too much bleeding to not enough bleeding, fibroids, they're all actually greatly helped by aloe vera. So that's really nice as well. And it's just a very gentle, cooling cleanser that's also nourishing to the tissue. So it's a very balancing herb. Um, the thing with aloe vera is that you want to make sure that you only use the inner fillet. So that's the inner juice or gel portion of the plant. You might see like whole leaf products. So the green part here, you can see in the picture, they might kind of process that whole green part. The green leaf itself, not the gel inside, is actually potentially irritating for the digestive system and the system as a whole. So stick with inner fillet, and I would use only food grade aloe vera. Don't head off in your cosmetic aisle and try to take that in. It's not pure enough. And I would stick with commercially available processed brands so you don't get into trouble if you try to process this yourself. Um, but again, really great beneficial detoxifying properties that won't irritate or strip down healthy tissues over the long haul. So it is potentially a sustainable thing you can put in your water um, on a daily basis. Aloe vera. Honey. So some people, like to put honey in their water because it tastes good or they like the sweetness or whatever. But honey, it actually has therapeutic effects. It's this sort of sugary, syrupy stuff that's made by bees as they collect nectar and pollen from flowers. Um, the thing about honey is that it's an unusual sugar. Almost every sugar promotes mucus formation in the body, except honey. Honey is very unusual that way. So that's why maybe by conventional wisdom, when you're sick, people might suggest, oh, drink some warm water with honey when you have like cold or congestion. That's actually good advice because the honey won't add to the level of congestion already in your body. Honey also includes propolis, royal jelly, and pollen, which can help with immunity and fatigue. And because it does have a little bit of pollen in it, you can use honey potentially to treat seasonal allergies. The thing though is that if you want to do this, you should really look for a local honey. So one that's in your area within a few miles of where you live, because the pollen from that area is what's on the bee's legs. And that's what you want to take in. You don't need much. It only takes a couple drops, maybe a fourth of a teaspoon at most. The way that this works is that by taking in just a few little grains of pollen internally, you develop what's called oral tolerance. And so your immune system will start to see that as something that it can tolerate instead of always, fight against and create the inflammation in your nose and your lungs and that sort of thing with all the congestion and headaches that go along with that. So again, just a few drops of local honey a day can be very helpful. The thing to know about this too, you want to make sure that it's actually local honey. So I have a few farms down the road from where I live, and I was buying honey from them. I thought, oh, let me support this local business. And, I don't actually have seasonal allergies, but I thought, well, it's good to know of a place I can send people if that's what they need. So I'm getting my honey, and the label on the jar is like this particular farm. So I said, oh, it's so nice that you guys produce local honey. And the guy says, well, actually, we ship it from Florida, and we put our label on it. And I live in Connecticut. So actually, what this local farm was selling was honey from Florida. So if I'd been using it for seasonal allergies, it wouldn't have worked. So always ask, make sure, look exactly for where the honey is produced and make sure it's close to you if you're going to use it for seasonal allergies. The other thing to know about honey is it's not advisable to cook honey. The properties change, the consistency changes. It can actually be hard to digest and clear out from the body. So just add a little bit, to your food on top in the water, and that's all. That's really the only way to work with that in a advisable way. So people might be thinking about other things besides honey. They might have an allergy to honey, for example. Some people like to put maple syrup in their water, like with lemon. There is a trace amount of minerals in maple syrup, but not a lot, so it's not a great way to get minerals in the body. It's essentially a natural sugar, So it's mostly for flavoring and sweetness, not huge amounts of medicinal properties with maple syrup. People might also be looking at agave nectar. Agave nectar is helpful to the extent that it's, for people who have dysglycemia, so problems with digesting sugar. So people who have diabetes and people who have hypoglycemia, agave nectar is mostly fructose, so it's mostly fruit sugar, which is kind of processed a little bit differently than glucose. It doesn't tend to spike blood sugar as fast and as hard as other sugars. It's considered a low glycemic food, but it still has carbohydrates in it, just like maple syrup does. So if you're looking for carb-free, none of these honey, maple syrup, or agave nectar will work for you. But if you're looking for low glycemic, agave might be kind of nice, potentially. And then the other one is stevia. So stevia is a plant, and the leaves taste a little bit sweet when you bite into them. So they just chop up that plant. It's natural, although there's a lot of preparations of it now, different flavors and stuff like that, which may not be natural, but on its own, just chopped up dried stevia leaf, has no carbs, but it is sweet. So that's great because it has no carbs. So for somebody who's really watching their carbs, this might be a good idea. Some people don't like the taste of it. There's a little bit of a taste, not much, but it might throw some people off. So something to consider there. So I was going to go through some herbs here that people might think about putting in their water first thing in the day to help them with their health. And I ordered them in a way where we're basically going from hottest to coldest. So we're sort of going through a spectrum here. And I think if we go through them this way, you can kind of compare and contrast and see the nuances of these different herbs to know when they might be appropriate. Because again, they have different properties based on the affinity of the organs that they travel to and based on their hotness or coolness or dryness. So let's go through that. We'll start with some heating spices. The first three here are all considered hot spices. The first one is cayenne. This one is super hot, like really, really hot. You don't need much of it for it to work. You just need a small, tiny pinch powder. And when I suggest this for people, I only suggest they use it for like 3 to 5 days. And the context in which I suggest it is they have a lot of congestion that just won't clear. So let's say they've got a cold or flu and they're pretty much over that, but they still have this congestion in their head that they can't seem to get over or break through. I might have them drink hot water with a little bit of lemon juice and just the tiniest pinch of cayenne in it. And cayenne's actually really great at breaking up that congestion that won't get broken up any other way. Because it's so hot, it's good for pain because it's a counter irritant for the nervous system. I mentioned congestion. It opens up the circulation. That's also why it works, is that it opens up those congested capillaries that are in the like nasal passages or in the lungs. Because it's so hot, it actually promotes sweating because it opens up the circulation. It can be helpful with balancing the third chakra. So for those of you who are yogis and are looking to balance your chakra system, it can be helpful because it's so hot, it actually increases the energy here. So if you're feeling like you're going through a situation where you need some fire in your belly, literally, in your third chakra, which is in the belly, located more or less in the belly, this can give you a little bit of that courage. It can give you that fire. It can give you that confidence, some of that bravado, if you're feeling like you need some. Again, I still wouldn't use it very often or very much because cayenne is such a potent herb. And because it is so hot, it is contraindicated in situations where there is high pitta. Again, that's an Ayurvedic concept. Basically, it means there's too much fire, inflammation in the body. Things like digestive ulcers, irritated tissues, hot tissues, ulcerated tissues, not a good idea. You don't need more heat. Stay away from this herb if you got any of that going on. It's also important to note that this pepper, cayenne, is in the nightshade family. And for some forms of arthritis, some people might be really sensitive to the nightshade family. That includes things like tomatoes, potatoes, peppers, because those foods contain solanaceae, and solanaceae poisoning can result in arthritis. So think about that. So the next herb here is ginger. It usually comes dry as a powder, or you can grate fresh ginger. There's a nice little picture there you can see. They are different. Dried powdered ginger is a lot hotter than fresh grated ginger, so you need less of it. The other thing is that fresh ginger is much better at settling the stomach. So some people, if they know something about ginger, usually it's like, oh yeah, it helps me settle my stomach, like they might have taken it when they were pregnant. For morning sickness, you can use it for travel sickness, some causes of nausea. Just a little bit on occasion. If you're taking this every day for those sorts of things, you probably need something else, and you might actually be building too much heat over time. So again, for occasional use, situational use only. Ginger is also pretty hot, not as hot as cayenne, but because it's hot, it's good for pain. It also increases the circulation, so it helps to move congestion along, whether it's in the joints or in the respiratory system. It's antispasmodic, so there's a sort of calming effect with ginger. You might notice if you drink some ginger tea. Great for the respiratory system, coughs, colds, flu, wheezing. It can help some sore throats, again, depending on what's causing the sore throat. If the sore throat is really dry and inflamed and irritated, ginger might make it worse, so consider that. But some sore throats, cold or flu type sore throat, it can help with allergies because, again, it's opening up the circulation, breaking up congestion. It helps with improving vessel tone, so the blood vessels. So it's a little bit of a cardiac tonic or cardiovascular tonic. Diaphoresis, it helps with sweating. Because it's hot and opens up the circulation, the blood, when you drink ginger tea, for example, the blood will flow closer to the surface of the skin, and you might even sweat a little bit. And then basically what you're doing is that the blood has a chance to release some heat through the skin that way. So that can be helpful. It helps with atherosclerosis, so plaque buildup, and hypercholesterolemia. So again, pretty good for the cardiovascular system here. It can help with indigestion, helps digestion generally, constipation, gas, diarrhea. More so the fresh ginger, not the dried ginger. Again, dried ginger is pretty super hot. So if you're any kind of hot, spicy, super spicy food can actually make diarrhea worse. So again, just small amounts of fresh ginger we're talking about here. Arthritis, I mentioned already. Ginger does have some antibacterial properties, and it's great for menstrual cramps because of the antispasmodic effect, plus it opens up the circulation when things are congested around the abdomen area and the uterus. It is also contraindicated in high pitta, fever, inflammation situations, or when there's ulcers or reflux. It's still hot enough to negatively impact those things. You want to be cautious and just use low doses in pregnancy with gallstones, inflammatory skin disease. The reason why is that, like with gallstones, ginger, because it kind of opens up the circulation and kind of gets things moving, it might do that for your liver. So you might have little gallstones that you don't know about or that don't appear on the scan. And if you open up the ducts leading away from the gallbladder and the liver, gallstones can start to move and get stuck in those ducts, and then you're in pain. So something to note there. Inflammatory skin disease, again, a little bit might be a good idea. Too much will make the skin more inflamed and more dry over time, just because of the nature of the heat. Bleeding, and it's opening up the circulation, so not a good idea for any kind of bleeding situation, or if you're on an anticoagulant, because it will to some degree double up with the anticoagulant effect of any medication. So that's ginger. Black pepper, also pretty hot, but this is dry, whereas ginger was more of a wet herb. Black pepper is dry, and you don't need much. Again, just a small pinch maybe, or a couple pinches there. Also, because it's so hot, a good counter irritant, so good for pain. It's also good for clearing congestion because it's hot and dry. It'll, so especially if you have congestion in the sinuses or lungs, that may be a good thing. Asthma, if it's a congestive asthma, bronchitis, if there's congestion there, pneumonia. It can help with circulation as well, help with digestion. It can actually clear a little bit rashes, some mild rashes on the skin surface. It can help with arthritis, especially if you have swollen joints, because the swelling, is a sign of too much water in the joints, and the dryness of the black pepper can help counteract that. Painful menses, especially when there's congestion in the abdomen because there's too much water there. Again, the dryness of the black pepper can be helpful. It also is good for balancing the third chakra. So getting a little bit of fire in the belly, a little bit of courage, and feeling more empowered. It can help with that. And it can help with digesting kind of heavier foods like cheese, rice, potatoes, avocado. It has similar properties, cayenne, but not as hot. So this is a little bit more useful or universal for people to use. So if we wanted to kind of compare and contrast these herbs, it's just a story to give you, some context. I was traveling through Iceland and I got some sort of lung thing. I was coughing and it was a dry cough. But I'm traveling, I'm not in my near my stores. I don't speak the language, that sort of thing. But on every table, in the hotel and in restaurants, there was black pepper. And it was pretty easy to get order hot water and get the black pepper. And actually, I put a little bit of milk in there. So I made a little sort of tea for myself by drinking hot water with black pepper and a little bit of milk. The reason why I put the milk in there is because my cough was dry, my lungs were dry, and the pepper is dry. So if I was just drinking hot water with black pepper, it might have warmed up my lungs, but it probably would have made things drier. So the milk was good for that. Milk generally is not a good idea if you're congested. So, because cow's milk, goat's milk is a little bit different, but cow's milk is just very mucus forming. But I wanted the mucus, I wanted the wetness, I wanted to cool down my lungs. So I would go around like 3 times a day when I ate, and I would drink this hot water with black pepper and a little bit of milk because that was easy to find everywhere I went. And luckily, a very nice Icelander I ran into introduced me to angelica root, which is a herb that grows natively there in that part of the world. And that was a perfect herb actually for the dry cough I had. So that was fantastic, and I was very fortunate to meet that very kind individual. My dry cough would have been much easier to treat if I was in Japan and fresh ginger was almost on every table, and that was easier to find um, than where I was at that. So dry cough, dry situation, wet cough, wet situation, and how to differentiate between these herbs a little bit. So now we're moving into kind of more the neutral spices in this category here, or in the spectrum. So cinnamon, pretty common herb all over the world. It's warming, but it's not super hot. You don't need too much. Again, good for pain, relieves tension, mentally, physically. It's great for the respiratory system, cold, cough, congestion, bronchitis. It improves circulation, so it's also a heart tonic as well. It's really great for diabetics and people with hypoglycemia. So cinnamon is known to help regulate sugar in the body. So this might be a really great one if you have either of those issues. It does help with indigestion. Again, because it's warming and it opens up the circulation, it can gently support arthritis. It does have antibacterial and antifungal properties. Actually, sometimes if I cut my finger slightly at home, we're just talking a small thing here, nothing major. Actually, sometimes I just pour a little cinnamon on there because it does have antibacterial properties. And it is also hemostatic. Cinnamon will stop bleeding, which is the last thing on this list that you see on the slide. So small cuts in the kitchen, maybe. It's also nice because it improves male fertility. So that's a whole different system than what we've talked about so far. Yeah, so for men who are looking to become fathers, this might be a nice herb to add to their daily mix of what they take in every day as beverages. And it helps improve female menses, almost every issue, too heavy, too light, because it's, again, a neutral spice. So it really is kind of a balancing spice for the most part. And it can help with more prevalent things like ovarian cysts, fibroids, and endometriosis in women. So that's also very nice. And we talked about the hemostatic or bleeding, being able to stop bleeding. That's one of the properties of cinnamon. Just want to be a little bit careful in pregnancy. You just want to watch the dosing there, not too often, not too much, because you see that cinnamon does have an affinity for the female uterus, which is helpful when you have issues there. But if you have a baby on board, you don't want to disturb that fragile balance there. Turmeric is another one, also pretty neutral. It's a little bit warming, but not too much. Similar things here: pain, cough, circulation, heart, blood vessels, diabetes. It's also helpful with indigestion. It's hepatoprotective, so it protects the liver. We talk about the doctrine of signatures in herbal medicine, where plants may actually look like the organs that they travel to and help the most. And the bright yellow color of turmeric is similar to the liver. So it can protect the liver, and you can use it that way. It helps with skin conditions because it helps the liver function more properly. And the liver, one of the main functions of the liver is actually to detoxify the body. So by clearing out the liver, you actually clear out the toxins that can show up on the skin. It can help with wounds, arthritis, and flexibility. It's used a lot for arthritis in general, but flexibility. So if you may not have arthritis, but if you're a yogi and you like to do yoga, or if you're an athlete and looking to increase your flexibility, turmeric supports joint health that way. It's really great for infections. It's a pretty strong antibiotic, actually. It does support uterine and breast health because it is a cleanser, gently warming, and improves circulation. It's also great for helping anemia. And on more of a kind of spiritual level, it helps clear all of the chakras in the subtle body. So it's great that way. You want to be cautious if you have gallstones because, again, it gets that liver moving and you don't want small gallstones to start moving and get stuck somewhere. Not a great idea for acute hepatitis, and because it does open up the circulation, you want to be cautious with anticoagulants. Cardamom, another neutral herb that's slightly warming but not too much. It has antispasmodic effects, great for the respiratory system, really likes the lungs, colds, cough, bronchitis, and asthma, hoarseness. It helps with the indigestion, nausea, vomiting, so it helps that upper digestive process. Belching, acid reflux, and then gas, liver, bile stimulant, so the middle level of the digestive process. It is a diuretic. It'll help get rid of extra water on the body. It also helps with burning urination, so it helps the bladder that way. It's great for morning sickness. This herb is great for balancing the fourth chakra, or the heart chakra, so the center of emotions, the chakra that's kind of the highway between the lower chakras of the material world and the higher chakras of the spiritual world. And actually, cardamom is kind of special because it helps to reduce mucus-forming properties of milk and is a slight antidote to caffeine. So that's why you find it a lot in chai, for example. That's where most people, I think in the West, find it. So it can just help balance that beverage out. So another story here, I was traveling through India this time, and I got another thing in my lungs, starting to get a little something in my lungs. I wasn't quite sure what it was. I just was feeling something coming on. So I went to the kitchen of the hotel where I was staying, and I asked for some hot water with turmeric and cardamom. I made myself a little tea, drank it, several cups of it, and I woke up the next morning and I was fine. So because cardamom has an affinity for the lungs, turmeric opens up the circulation, is a great antibiotic. I made myself a little concoction there, or the kitchen did, and I was good. So it's kind of nice to have this information when you're traveling, or you know, so you can just use common kitchen spices and common groceries to help yourself when need be. So this last list here, we're getting into the cooling spices now. So cumin, cooling, it's also great for pain because it's more of an anti-inflammatory. So it helps pain that's based more on too much heat rather than too much congestion. So, but it does help with congestion to some degree as well because it helps the cardiovascular system. It can help with indigestion, gas, nausea, diarrhea. So kind of the upper and lower part of the digestive system. It can help to regulate menses and supports lactation, and it gently balances the third chakra. This is more in the way of maybe your third chakra is a little too hot, you're a little too fiery, you're a little too pro, me. This can kind of chill that out a little bit. And cumin's also great for fevers as a cooling herb. Coriander, also cooling, great for all kinds of inflammation, even conjunctivitis, so inflammation in the eye. It's an antispasmodic, great for coughs. Allergy, sore throat. It will stimulate appetite, so be aware of that. You may want that if you're not eating enough, you feel. But if you're not wanting your appetite to open up, this may not be the best herb for you. It helps with indigestion, nausea, diarrhea, burning urination, so some affinity for the bladder as well. And as a diuretic, will get rid of extra water and helps with hives, rash, burns, basically irritated skin. And it lifts the spirit. It balances the second chakra, which is the chakra involved in creativity and one-on-one relationships, so relationships with other people and our ability to create in the world, whether that's a baby or an art project or something like that. And it's great for fever because it's pretty cooling. Fennel also very cooling, calming, antispasmodic. It can help with photosensitivity a little bit. If you have something like lupus, it can be helpful there. Helpful with coughs, asthma, congestion, cold, so affinity for the lungs as well. Blood vessel tone, helping with the digestive system, nausea, colic, gas, diarrhea, stimulates the liver. Fennel is such a mild herb. They even give it to babies to help with baby colic. So pretty mild here. And this herb, in contrast to coriander, curbs the appetite instead of stimulates it, so something to note. It helps the bladder as well as a diuretic, but also it can help with things like cystitis, so inflamed bladder tissue, burning urination. It supports healthy breastfeeding, lactation, can help with menstrual cramps and morning sickness, so some female issues here. Because it's a diuretic, it can help with edema by getting the extra water off the body. And it helps, on a spiritual level, helps to increase clarity of consciousness. So traditionally in Ayurveda, they will actually combine cumin, coriander, and fennel. They call it CCFT in equal doses. So for 1 cup of water, you might use, if you're using powder, maybe 1/4 of a teaspoon each. If you're using whole seed, you might use 1/2 a teaspoon each. If you're using whole herb, you want to actively boil that to open up the herb. Powder you can just kind of put into water that's been boiled and cover the top so you don't lose the essential oils, and let it sit there for about 5 to 8 minutes. CCFT is great for cooling the body of inflammation anywhere in the body. It's very gentle, very balancing. They use it a lot when they do detox programs. So again, a classic formula from Ayurveda can be helpful. So you can actually combine them, these 3 herbs, and get all of these, positive benefits out of it in one tea, which is kind of nice. And the last herb here is mint, very cooling, relieves mental tension, can help with headaches, is antispasmodic, clears the mind, improves concentration. So you can see here just the symptoms it helps with. You can see that mint has an affinity for the mind, for the brain. We haven't talked about, this much mental affinity with any of the other herbs. It can help with the sore throat, laryngitis, bronchitis, colds and flus, so some affinity for the respiratory system as well, the lungs. It improves circulation, can help with nervous indigestion. So again, you're combining the nervous system effect with the digestive effects. It can help with gas, bloating, IBS, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, colic. It can help with painful burning urine as well, so some affinity for the bladder. Inflamed skin, allergic itching. Because of these cooling effects, again, it's going to take some of that heat out of the body. Morning sickness. Some women find this actually more helpful than ginger, especially if they have hot symptoms or constitution. Mint might be a little bit better. It can help with menstrual pain, and it kind of energetically, it normalizes the flow of prana or vital energy all over the body. And what's funny about mint is that it'll actually increase sweating initially because it opens up the circulation. It brings the blood to the surface of the skin, and you might sweat a little bit, but then that helps to release heat from the blood. So your internal system is cooler, ends up being cooler, even though initially you might sweat a little bit for like the first few minutes after you drink mint tea, and then you'll feel colder. It's kind of funny that way. And because it's a pretty cold herb, it's good for fevers. So the thing though is that because we're kind of on the other end of the spectrum now with pretty cold herbs, you also need to use caution. So with mint, you want to be cautious with any kind of high vata or high wind situation, things like epilepsy, so instability of the mind, of the nervous system, because epilepsy is considered a cold vata-like symptom in Ayurveda. Also, acid reflux is not a good idea. Mint can open up the gas or the pyloric sphincter, the kind of valve that sits between the stomach and the lower intestine. It can irritate that, and so that valve will stay open, which means food can kind of come back up. Not pleasant. So mint is not a good idea for acid reflux because it does stimulate the liver a little bit. You got to same caution here with gallstones. It may interact a little bit with iron supplements, so if you're really trying to pile up on iron, mint may not be the best idea. And just a note is that spearmint is milder than peppermint in its effects. So hot, neutral, cooling herbs. And I put this slide in here, especially for those people who are deep into Ayurveda, so you can see all the things that we've talked about from lemon to mint, and you can look at their effects side by side. That may help you. So we didn't really talk about taste too much, but students of Ayurveda will understand, sour, astringent, sweet, pungent, bitter. There's no salty effects on here or ingredients on here, but I think all the other ones are. Represented by some of these herbs. We did go through heating and cooling, though. That was one thing that I've been talking about a lot here, and so they're listed here: heating and cooling, and then the post effect, sweet and pungent. So either building of the body or kind of breaking down the body. Sour is kind of in between. We didn't talk about that too much, but for students of Ayurveda, they may like this information side by side. And we did mention a little bit Vata, Pitta, and Kapha. So Vata, very quickly and briefly, is considered to be too much wind. So when there's too much coldness, dryness in the body. Pitta is when there's too much fire. So when there's too much heat and inflammation in the body, too much intensity. And Kapha is when there's too much earth or heaviness or building in the body. And you can see here that all of the things that the additions to water, if we look at the Kapha list here, they're pretty much all good or beneficial except for lime. That's the one that increases congestion in the body. And Kapha, when there's too much Kapha in the body, there's too much congestion. So you can see that that one herb is not great if you are in a Kapha dominant situation or constitution. Pitta, because it's fiery, you want to watch the stuff that's fiery. So you can see that lemon, there's a positive sign there. That's an increase. Cayenne and ginger, especially dry ginger, those are increases. Things that are kind of neutral, lime, honey, fresh ginger, black pepper, cinnamon, turmeric. So the warming ones, for the most part, are okay for Pitta as long as you don't overdo them. And then if we look at Vata or wind, when the body's cold and dry, most of the warming herbs will be good, and the neutral herbs will be good because they're increasing circulation and balancing the kind of coldness of Vata. But if you look at cayenne and ginger, you start to see there's not as much beneficial property there because they're just too hot and they're too intense. And Vata is already kind of, sort of this idiosyncratic or, has symptoms that come and go or intermittent system. And so when you have something that's too hot or too cold or too light or too dry, it tends to drive that imbalance rather than rebalance that system. So you don't want things that are too hot or too cold. That's why if you look at cayenne and ginger and then mint, you kind of the opposite ends of the spectrum there in terms of the temperature effects, energetic effects of these herbs. That's why the ends of the spectrum are not particularly good for Vata, but the middle one's helpful. So there you have it side by side. So we've talked a lot about why it's important to think about what you drink in the morning, getting the system balanced and fleshed out first thing in the morning. And we've talked a lot about what to put in the water potentially if you want to help balance your system even more. But perhaps the most important thing to mention is that how you drink the water and the ritual of how you drink whatever it is you drink. Actually, you may not even decide to change what you're drinking. You may decide to keep your habits of what you're drinking. But if you take a moment to really appreciate whatever it is you're drinking, tea, coffee, juice, and really hold the cup, really look at the cup, really look at the water or the beverage, and just really appreciate it. That can really set a nice tone for the rest of your day, especially if you can, again, just kind of feel that energy and settle into that energy, absorb that energy, and then take that energy with you into your day. So again, you might just take whatever it is you do, make it a little tiny ritual for yourself to support yourself on that level every day. So let me just read this. You might have something that you're drinking right now. You might come back to this later when you do have something that you're drinking. But let me just read it for you. So choose a beautiful cup. Notice the fun color, the texture, the aroma of the herbs. Slowly, gently pour in the warm water. Watch the magic as the water transforms color. Take a sip. Notice every nuance of flavor. Drink in beauty, peace, balance, flow. Feel the support of all the elements. The earth that created your cup, the water that flows through you now, the fire of the sun growing the plant, the wind gently blowing the leaves, the space it creates in your mind, heart, and spirit, and offer a bit of gratitude. Sometimes we forget. We just start rushing into our day, jumping into our day. We have so many things to do, so many places to be, and we forget. Not everybody on the planet has a cup to drink from. Not everybody on the planet has clean water to drink. And here we've just spent all this time talking about all these extra goodies you can throw in the water to help yourself even more. So it's nice to just start your day realizing how much, Earth and nature and the universe is really supporting you to live your purpose at its highest level. So if we just, wind up here, wrap up here with just a few kind of intentions for this talk. Obviously, this information was shared with you to provide better health and well-being for you on all levels, from physical to mental to emotional to spiritual. And we talked about why, what, and how to start your day with a beverage that's suitable for you. Given you simple, sustainable action steps to empower you and the simple choices you make every day. Offered a bit of knowledge about water, herbs, food, yoga, and Ayurveda, and how to integrate different natural therapeutics and paradigms to support your health. And hopefully also from this talk you get maybe a more appreciation for the natural pharmacy that already exists in your kitchen or grocery store. You may not have known that all these things that maybe you're eating or drinking every day are helping you on so many levels. And it's really an opportunity also to celebrate the beauty and power of nature, to heal us and support our health. And hopefully through all of this, you end up with a better relationship with yourself and nature. By supporting yourself and improving your health and well-being, you really are supporting everyone on the planet, and that's a great gift. So thank you. And cheers to you. If this information was interesting to you and you'd like to learn more, most of the information in this presentation is based on a book I wrote called Drink to Your Health, Medicinal Teas, Juices, and Milks from Around the World. And you can pick up a copy on Amazon.com if that's of interest to you. So thank you again for your time. Thank you for taking care of yourself. And I wish you well. Until next time, take care.